The idea of growth can be puzzling. A little girl asks her father, "Daddy, are you still growing?" "No," her father says. "Why do you ask?" "Because, Daddy, your head is coming up through your hair." Growth can be puzzling. So much more puzzling is spiritual growth. It is in many ways easier to say what it is not. Spiritual growth is not possessing more biblical or theological knowledge. That is intellectual growth, and while it is useful, we can use this knowledge to make others feel stupid. Nor is spiritual growth controlling your actions and urges in such a way that you cannot be accused of any sin or wrongdoing. This is moral and ethical growth, and while it can make us more decent human beings, we also can use this saintly platform as a place from which to judge sinners. Prayer, worship, the giving of alms, these are not spiritual growth. They are disciplines that can lead to spiritual growth, but they can also be used as a checklist to ensure ourselves that we are good people and perhaps a whisper above the listless. Here's my shot at a definition of spiritual growth for today. Spiritual growth is the expansion of the circle of one's identity to include the identity of others until the whole of God's creation is encompassed. But at the same time, retaining one's own sense of personal identity. Okay, that was a lot to ask you to remember, right? Yeah, what did he say at the beginning of that sentence? Spiritual growth is the expansion of the circle of one's individual identity to include the identity of others until the whole of God's creation is encompassed. But at the same time, retaining one's sense of personal identity. In other words, the expansion of your identity to include others does not erase your own identity. You don't disappear. Forget that for a while. I think you already forgot it anyway. Last week we left Jacob. Remember, he is seconds younger than his twin brother Esau. Jacob's circle is so small that he feared there wouldn't be enough for him, so he tricked his brother into selling him his firstborn birthright. And then later, when Jacob's father Isaac is old and blind, Jacob puts goat skin on his arms, since his brother was much hairier than he, and Jacob pretends that he is Esau, and consequently, he gets the firstborn blessing. And when Esau, the older brother, hears this, he says that he is going to kill his younger brother, Jacob. And so Jacob, the liar, the grasper, escapes. And he's running to Haran, where his mother's family lives. And on the way, he has a dream in which God's blessing to Abraham, almost word for word, is given to him. There are stairs leading up to heaven, and angels are ascending and descending on it. This isn't an aluminum ladder kind of thing like, you have hanging on the wall of your garage. This is more like an ancient ziggurat, which is kind of a stone stairway that leads all the way up and all the way down. It's interesting to me, though I'm not going to dwell on it today, that it says in the text that angels are ascending and descending on it. They're not descending and ascending. Isn't that interesting? Angels' home is earth. That's such an interesting thing. I don't know what to make of it, though. God says, I am the God of your father Abraham and your father Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east and the north and the south. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. You hear that blessing, and you know the story of who Jacob is, and you know what Jacob has done, and maybe you're like me, you wonder, what the heck is God doing? Giving the blessing of Abraham to a self-centered liar who has deceived his father and cheated his brother out of his rightful blessing. What is God up to? I would suggest that Jacob is a paradigm of you and me, of human beings. Maybe we don't actually come out and steal the blessing of others, but we are jealous of what others have gotten, sometimes through an accident of birth, inheriting money, or a business, or talent, or their connections. And we gossip about them and mumble curses under our breath in their general direction. Our circles don't include them, really. So when we're talking about God, the mystery of the universe, and God's relationship to Jacob, we're talking about us and God's relationship to us. In the Bible and in real life, when you lay down at night, we're vulnerable and less in control. And the other side of our brains begins to communicate through dream images and messages. And we can get, if we're attentive, another view of ourselves which expands our identity. So look at this dream that Jacob has. Jacob's identity is expanded beyond himself to include his grandfather Abraham, his father Isaac, and then God's self. It is as if to say, it is almost as if God is saying, Jacob, you think that blessings and rights are so scarce that you're worried about a puny firstborn birthright and blessing? Let go of your ego, you short-sighted numbskull. You want a blessing? I'll show you a blessing. Your offspring will own the land on which you stand, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through your offspring. Ha! Try to beat that for a blessing. See if you can steal something like that, Jacob. You got God just coming right at him. Talk about stretching his circle of identity. These things happen to us all the time. These little odd experiences that open us up to a larger identity. A look from a stranger that we remember as we're falling asleep one night. A message from an old friend on Facebook who reminds us of what an influence we had upon them. An unexpected act of kindness on the part of someone we just meet on the street. Sometimes it's a song, a movie, a painting. Any of these could be cracking us open to an expansion of our identity, to spiritual growth. Ira Progoff tells the story of a woman who he was working with. The woman was once a corporate executive, but she had given that up to raising kids. She had one baby And then, lo and behold, she had twins. And this was so overwhelming to her that she fell into a deep depression and sought out a therapist, and she found Ira Progoff. He worked with her for several months. She made some progress, but she was still lacking energy and vision for her new life. And then she came in one day into Progoff's office with a bright face and a smile. And he asked what was up for her. And she said she really wasn't sure, but the evening before, like always, she washed the dishes after supper when her husband was getting the kids ready for bed. It was like going into a trance, she said, feeling the warm, soapy water on her hands and turning the plates and glasses over in her hands and placing them gently in the dish drainer. Her eyes were unfocused, she said, looking out the window, looking but not at anything in particular. And during this time, she became aware of a bird flying back and forth from a nest. She paid no attention at first, but then she saw that it came back carrying something in its mouth. And then she became aware of tiny little mouths peeping out of the nest, opening and closing, and the mother dropping whatever she had in her beak into those little eager mouths. And without knowing why, the woman with soapy hands began to weep. And the bird mother would leave and fly back with something else in her mouth for those tiny mouths, and when the woman saw her again, she began to weep. And finally, she pulled the plug from the sink, and all the dirty water ran out, and she took the dish towel and she wiped her eyes. And she went into the kids' room, and she hugged her children, and with her husband, she put them down to bed. Progoff asked her what had happened. And she said, well, it's just stupid, you know. But suddenly I realized, she said, no, it was more than a realization. She said, I really felt that I'm part of the chain of being with that mother bird. And what we are doing means everything for the future of the world. I know that things will still be hard and difficult. But this makes it lighter to be part of something larger and to know how important it is, these things that I do. This is spiritual growth. You know, lots of times we think of spiritual growth as something that, you know, brings fireworks that go off and bands are playing and there's this tremendous, enormous awareness that kind of shifts us into some holy and spiritual plane in which we will never suffer harm or depression or uncertainty again. But it's not that. I mean, it could be that. God can do what God wants, you know. But if we don't pay attention to these little things that come at us sideways, like dreams in the middle of the night, we might miss it. We might miss the opportunity for our own spiritual growth. One more thing here at the end of this text. Did you catch it? After the dream, Jacob makes a vow. So just listen to it. If God will take care of me, give me food and clothes on this journey, and return me safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God, and I will give 10% of all I have to God. Isn't that the best? Remember, he's a trickster, right? He's tricked his brother and his father, and he's gotten the birthright and the blessing. He's a manipulator, right? And he's had spiritual growth. He's now identified himself with Abraham and Isaac and God and the future generations that will populate the earth. And then what does he do? He turns right back around and he manipulates God. If you do these things, God, if you keep me safe and get me back to this place so that I can rest on my father's land, then I'll allow you to be my God. And I'll give you 10% of everything that I get. Did I tell you? Jacob is a paradigm of human beings. Is this who we are or what? Oh my goodness, spiritual growth is a lifelong process. You just don't go into it once and go zip, zap, bang, and there we are. I'm a completely new person. No, it's step by step, and those same things keep coming back at you like a whack-a-mole at the carnival. You know? And you got to work with them again and again and again. My hope for us, of course, is that we keep opening ourselves up, like Jacob did to this dream. You go all the way to the end of the book of Genesis, and you begin to see the fullness of his transformation, but it takes a long time. And hopefully, we will keep opening ourselves up to the vulnerabilities and dreams and images and odd experiences that might bring an expansion of our own identity, so that as we near our last bend, our grandchildren might say to us, "Grandma, Grandpa, you must still be growing because your head is coming through your hair."